Hey, welcome. I'm so happy you're here. I'm Dr. Ariel Hammond, and this is the Enrichment Entrepreneur, a podcast for current and aspiring entrepreneurs who are in the business of helping kids thrive. We're talking after-school programs, summer camps, tutoring, enrichment, the people and places that show up for kids outside the classroom. I'm still building right alongside you, and that's exactly why we're here, to learn, grow, and figure this out together.
Let's go!
Hello and welcome back to the Enrichment Entrepreneur. I'm your host, Ariel, and today I am very happy to have our guest, Darren Chase. He is the founder and CEO of Chase Youth Programs in Atlanta. So, Darren, before we get started learning a bit more about you and your journey, I want to start with where you've come from. So you graduated from Emory at 20 years old, the youngest in your class. 4 months later, you had a business. So most people at that age, I was a mess at 20. Most people at that age are still figuring out what they want to do. What made you move with such surety and take such fast action?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. So most people who wanted to get into, the education space aren't the people who are rushing through college and trying to be the youngest person in their class. However, I've always had an interesting relationship with education. I've had some rough chapters and also some really awesome and influential people who have really changed my life, specifically through sports and education. So that's I always knew I wanted to get in the realm of education and kind of figuring out how can I combine my two loves, so sports and education, into one thing. So I know that, again, it's kind of weird for someone who's saying they love education and also try to do it as fast as possible. But it was more for me, less the learning side of it and more like the role model side of things and seeing all the differences that someone made on me and wanting to be able to do it as well. So for me, it was important to be able to do it on as large of a scale as possible. So that's why I started a company, to be able to do it that way.
So I've done a little bit of my research on you. So what I love about your story is your story doesn't start with a business plan. It starts with you in third grade, right? You moving to a new city and looking to find your place and eventually finding that through an after-school program. And now you're building those environments for other kids. If you've ever wondered what it looks like to go all in early, this episode is for you. Darren, welcome to the show. So you moved from Atlanta in third grade, and it was a challenge. What was that like?
Yeah, so again, that was a little while ago. However, it was a pretty rough stage.
It wasn't that long ago, Darren.
I know, I'm not that old. Yeah, it was a pretty rough stage. So when I came here, dealt with a lot of anxiety issues to the point where, I had to take medication for like antipsychotic thoughts. So there's a lot of stuff going on with me personally. And I felt like, for the most part, I wasn't supported in the school environment. Luckily, I did have parents and then eventually, met a coach who were really supportive of me. And I kind of saw that difference. And most of the educators I've had have been really awesome. But the ones that I had that year just felt like they didn't, and again, educators are very busy and I totally understand that, and now I understand it more. But it felt like, they were always kind of just trying to get rid of me instead of trying to help. And when I started to have people who tried to help me, that's when it really made a difference.
Yeah. And I think so many people can relate to your story. That's why enrichment and those out of school learning opportunities are so crucial, because nothing fits every person. And the school structure, that model is not going to fit everyone. And for those it works for, fantastic. But some of us, we need to learn in different ways. And every kid deserves to have that trusted adult that believes in them, pours into them, that they feel really understood by, and also those learning experiences that really light them up. Think of my own school experience, and I speak to my husband about school often, and his wasn't in school. It was doing athletics after school. And so wherever we can find those opportunities for children, that's our role as the adults who love them to try. And so they can have those experiences that they need to have the best childhood possible. So when you had a science class and a tennis coach that changed things for you, what did those people do differently?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I felt in the science class specifically, it was just like a different environment and it felt like it was more collaborative. We had the ability to interact with our peers. So we were encouraged to kind of take risks and be able to talk freely. And I didn't feel that way in like the standard classroom. So, I felt like the guy who was teaching that class was supportive and helpful. But really, the most influential person outside of my own family was definitely that tennis coach that I had. I started with him, I think, in fourth grade. For me, he would get super mad at me. I remember, like, if I wasn't playing good, he would get so mad. One day, he just left early and just left me there. But, which again, sounds a little crazy, but knowing that someone cared that much to be able to do that, like he would get so affected by it and how I was playing. And, he would also like check in and be like, what's going on in your actual life outside of tennis? Like, is there a reason you're not playing as good today? So for me, it felt like having someone that believed in me that much that really didn't have to, and I'm very grateful again for the resources I have and had within my family, but for someone who was outside of that realm to also show that much care and that much interest, that's what really made the difference for me.
Yeah. I relate to that so much. There's this saying that like people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And your story highlights that perfectly. I remember my time as a school principal, sometimes run into my former students. I've been doing this long enough where they would be my elementary school students, and now I see them and they're your age. And I still remember their names, first, last name, their parents and everything. And recently I ran into a former student where I went to Ulta and she said, I remember you. Kids were afraid of you. And I thought, oh no. And she said, no, but in a good way. Like we knew how much you cared. And that experience that you're talking about, that's exactly what I've always just tried to have with the children that it was my privilege to serve, which is I have high expectations for you. I'm not always playing with you, but at the foundation, there's a deep love and regard for you. And people feel that like children are such intuitive little beings. They're not deluded by what we tell them to believe. They can just see what's real, what's not, who's real, who's not. And then they connect with you based on that. So that authentic like regard for them is really the first step in making that connection. And it sounds like that's what your coach did for you.
Yes, exactly.
Quick break. I'm building NROPS, an all-in-one operations platform built specifically for kids enrichment, entrepreneurs, and operators. I built it because I needed it. Go to getinrops.com to learn more and get on the list. Okay, back to the episode. Perfect. So you went from coaching tennis. So first you were a student learning, then you started coaching tennis, now to running programs at a school. Well, eventually running programs at a school and then launching your own company in pretty fast succession. So what was the moment you knew where you were building something bigger than coaching?
For my kind of journey throughout it was I always wanted to be a teacher since seventh grade. That's when I started working in like camp programs, and I always knew I wanted to be in that field. Then I was just a freshman in college and I was at my high school basketball game for, my friends wanted to go. It was winter break for us. And the athletic director came up to me and was like, hey, like our JV coach quit and we need someone to step in like last minute. So I had never really thought about getting into coaching like in a serious manner, but I ended up, again, I'm pretty young. So I was coaching kids that I knew. So one of the kids who I knew, he didn't make the varsity team. I said as a joke to him, hey, like you should fire your coach and hire me. Totally joking. And he texts me like the next week and he's like, hey, like when can you start? And I'm like, okay. So I hadn't even touched a racket in like a year, to be 100% honest. So I'm like, I need to like go play tennis again. Like I need to get back into it. So it just took off from there. I started with him and then ended up having like 20 kids that I was coaching, got rid of the 20 to focus on like higher performance, like high school kids, some who went on and played in college. But I knew two reasons. One, I'm injured. So like I knew it wasn't sustainable long term. And two, I kind of, I always wanted to go into more of the education side of things. So was talking to someone at Emory and she was like, hey, like I was talking about different ideas in education. And she was like, you keep talking about tennis, like when we're not talking about tennis or anything related to it. So she was like, why don't you try and come up with something that can combine both of the things that you want to do. So that's kind of how everything started for me.
That's great advice. So shout out to her. And that's advice I would encourage any person, especially a young person, as you navigate what your path is going to be, especially professionally. What's that thing that you just naturally keep talking about and you want to do for fun? I mean, especially as soon as you start to do something for what you rely on for your livelihood,
Right.
some fun is going to be taken out of that. So the more you have that deep love for it, the better, because that can sustain you in those challenges, those challenging times that will inevitably come. So, Darren, you scaled a school program division from nothing to 16 schools in under a year. What's one thing that you think made that work?
Yeah. So when you start working with more and more schools, it becomes harder to be personally involved, which is somewhat hard for me. But I think what made it work, at least at the beginning, was being personally involved. So making sure the directors know who I am. If I'm going to show up and drop in on a coach, I'm not going to be observing them with a notebook. I'm going to be helping do the drills. I'm going to help them set up. One thing I always do is I show up 15 minutes before they're supposed to show up, set up all of their equipment for them so that when they come, and then I'm like, hey, how are you? And I usually don't try and surprise them. Every once in a while, I'll be like driving by and I'll just pop in. If something, someone cancels a meeting or something, but usually I don't try and do like the surprise drop-ins. I try and if I'm there, I'm just assisting them. I'm not taking control. So I think it's twofold. One is building relationships with your staff, and two is building it with the school. And then, with the kids, that's probably the hardest part of this is I miss that aspect of it when you're more behind a computer than you are teaching. But when you're there, just, trying to make an impact and trying to make sure you know everyone that you're emailing to.
Yeah, that is a wonderful servant-based leadership model for how you interact with instructors and coaches. I have a similar approach, and when I'm going to visit a program, I want to be of service first and foremost. I want to add value to their experience. I don't want to be another thing that bogs them down. And that can be tailored to your staff member. You have to know your people. So for some, if I go into a program and wow, this is a lot going on, then I'm just going to help the whole time. But I always want to lighten your load and relieve that burden. And your approach, you plan for that. In the first moment that they come to the program and see you, what they feel is relief. Naturally, they might feel a bit of performance anxiety,
Right.
but they feel that immediately that is minimized because they then see, oh, he set up everything for me. Like he helped me out. And eventually with that approach, more and more and more, people look forward to you coming in and observing their programs or being a part because they know you're going to help set up, you're going to help with dismissal and whatever other ways that they might need support. So yeah, that's a wonderful approach. How do you approach establishing your expertise and yourself as the leader in different interactions, whether it's with school partners or families or your instructors? And I ask this because I was a principal since I was 24. I was like the youngest principal in the country. And I was very insecure and self-conscious about it. I would try to hide my age. I would try to dress in ways that maybe made me look 10 years older. It was
Right.
really weird because I wanted to be respected. But I wonder now you're in a similar position and you're in a leadership position and you're interacting with people who may expect someone at your level to be a bit older. How do you
Right.
navigate that and use it in your favor?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think my receding hairline helps a little bit. I think people think I'm a little older than I am,
Okay.
but just kidding. But yeah, no, it's a good question. I think most of our staff, when they find out how old I am, are pretty surprised. Our leadership panel is mostly people that are a lot older than me who have master's degrees. A lot of our staff has master's degrees and some are currently pursuing PhDs in our STEM department. So yeah, it's something that I do think about a little bit. I do feel like I'm probably one of the less qualified people on paper, but I know that the products that I can deliver and the ways that we do stuff are better. And I'm fully confident in that. So I think with that in mind, there's probably two things I would say. One is that I feel like I don't consider myself in charge of everything. Like I consider at least like the directors and the staff as the people in charge. And I really work for them. So especially the directors, I want to help the staff out as much as possible. But really, like if we have like a weekly check-in with a director, it's more like, what can I do for you? So making it very collaborative. And then honestly, I feel like I know I'm young, but I feel like I've been doing this forever since I was 12 in camps. And then kind of, I was the first ever student to be hired for the K to 12 school that I worked for in the lower school. So I kind of started that program, and I ended up leading like a mentorship program with a bunch of people that were my grade and below to kind of get that off the ground. And then I ended up being like a program lead, and then a bunch of stuff like that. So I feel like I have done it for a while. And I think honestly, being able to say that I'm 21 and have done all of that is more impressive in a way, not to take anything away, but I think a lot of people would love to have gotten there, and it takes them a lot of time. And I think I got a head start on it. So
Yeah, that's a wonderful perspective. I eventually had that as well, and I used it to my advantage. One, I can relate to the kids a lot more easily.
yes.
They naturally wanted to be around me just because they thought I looked young, and they would always like guess my age. Sometimes they would guess 100. Crazy. But they really enjoyed the energy, and it was a benefit working with children when they see that vitality.
Yep.
They love that. And like you say, it's about the results that you get. It's not necessarily about, with anything really, how long have you been doing this? It's about
Right.
how effectively are you doing this? If you've been doing it 20 years and you haven't learned anything in the last 15, well, that's really not impressive.
Yeah.
It's about the quality of the work you produce. And I use that imposter syndrome to make me highly, highly effective. And it sounds like you've done something similar where you use that energy that you have as a competitive advantage. And
Right.
you aren't measuring yourself by how many years you've been in this formal position but more the longer pathway and trajectory that you've been leading up, all of the experiences that have prepared you for your success now.
Right. And I will just add on like one thing I've noticed, and it's not always true, but I've had a few high schoolers that I've hired to help me with some more like leadership type positions that, they would never really be able to get if they didn't know me and we hadn't worked together, mostly people I've taught. And those kids will work, twice as hard because they want to prove that they can do it. So I feel like I have a little bit of that in me as well with my age.
Okay, so I feel convicted here because I have been very hesitant to
Okay.
employ like high school students, the younger they are. And it's so interesting. I'm just having that moment right now. Like, this was something that I thought was a challenge for me that I would have to prove
Okay.
myself against like ageism. And now when I hire, I avoid high school and really
Right.
young. I try to, as older as possible, like grad school.
Okay.
But you've had success with that. So that is really interesting. So what
Yeah.
type of support or training does it take to be a successful employer supervisor of a minor?
Sure. And I mean, there's a certain rule, like at schools, like you have to be 18 at least to be a lead, I think, at most schools. So, we're not sending like a 16-year-old kid to be a lead instructor. Sometimes if they go to the school, they'll be like the assistant. But I mostly mean like on the admin side. So when I worked at the other company, I was an executive director but I started when I was in college, of a nonprofit. We had, I think, over 1,000 kids. Brought on a high schooler to be my direct assistant for that, and he ended up collecting like over 100 rackets for the underprivileged kids and all this stuff. And he kind of led a bunch of initiatives, and he's helping me now with some stuff because I'm not a nonprofit, but we partner with nonprofits, so we don't bring any money in there, and he's trying to donate them to the nonprofits that we work for now. So essentially, yeah, I mean, but something like that, you have to, like, for me, I have to really like the kid and have worked with them for a while, because you got to be like talking to them all the time and kind of helping guide them and show them what to do. But I think if you find the right kid, they're really, really passionate about it.
Yeah,
And I've had two that have done that for me.
that is a great perspective to share. I have increasing admin needs behind the scenes. And sometimes you do need someone local who can go and drop off the flyers and collect the yard signs and organize your materials. But you also you want to be mindful of your resources. And so what do you do when you hire locally? Then we think, okay, well, they're going to cost a lot, even if the task is a pretty simple task. But if we're creative and consider, well, for a high school student, this could be a paid internship for them. And they can have even more energy and a fresh perspective, maybe a social media intern. There are lots of opportunities to work throughout the workforce and throughout the generations if we are open-minded and creative. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. And actually, so I had those 2 kids I'm talking about out of the 16 schools that we got, they got 4 of them collectively. So they went out and actually pitched to the schools on behalf of, it wasn't I worked for a different company before, but then I think out of those, a few of them work with us now. So yeah, so they went out, but you have to really trust them,
Yeah. And it makes sense as a pipeline behind the scenes. Work with me as, a paid intern, some very contained, not front facing tasks. And then for those who are really fantastic, well, that's building your instructor pipeline down the line. And they're in college after they graduate for 4 years. So that is a lot lower turnover if it fits their schedule. So that's an investment in your business and your workforce pipeline. So that's strategic and it works on a lot of different levels. Very smart.
Definitely.
See, that's that fresh perspective that you bring. Not me being the old person in the dynamic, learning from you. All right. So, okay, cool. That sounds great. My next question, you are still relatively early in Chase Youth programs. In your journey so far, what has surprised you the most?
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit before, but I think what surprised me the most is kind of every once in a while being upset that I'm not the one going out and coaching. And it's really, I tried to balance it at one point for a little bit when I was with the other company, and it's just not sustainable. And I know for me, the impact that I can make actually being on the court, and it's not really about tennis. I mean, I could coach tennis, but it was more about the other stuff that comes with that. And kind of losing that it still is. It's very hard for me. And I know that we can make more of a difference on a larger scale if I'm sitting behind a computer, but I do miss that aspect of it for sure. So I think that's probably been the main struggle for me personally. The other thing that has surprised me the most is kind of the cash flow situation. So it does become hard when we've expanded a little bit faster than I thought, balancing kind of, do we expand now or do we kind of wait until we have more income coming in? Because how it works, at least with the schools I work for, is we have to upfront all of the costs and then the schools pay us at the end. So that has been somewhat of a surprise. For me, I kind of knew that, but actually dealing with it is a little bit different, especially when I've done it for other companies. But now that I'm the one floating all of the money, has definitely been a bit of a, I don't want to say struggle, but a little bit of a shock.
Yeah, I experienced the same thing. I think many of us in this space experience the seasonality. If we are working with partners and it's net 30, net 60, sometimes net 90, there are a lot of different types of ways and timing that we collect our income.
Yep.
And sometimes, a lot of times we collect the income after the service has been delivered, or it might be well before the service is being delivered. So monitoring our cash flow and being really on top of our finances, I think it's always going to be important for an entrepreneur, but I think it's especially important for us in this space. A resource that helped me was, what is it called? Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. So anyone who is starting and they just want to make order out of their bookkeeping and accounting, I highly recommend that resource. And I think his website, mikemichalowicz.com, or you could just Google Profit First, the method. It's a really intuitive way to start to get ahead of your finances and planning. So recommend that to the listeners. All right. So our next question, what in your perspective is the hardest part of working inside schools that nobody talks about?
That nobody talks about.
Or they might be talking about it. I don't know.
Okay.
What
Fair
it,
enough.
what's the hard part about working in schools that maybe people might not know?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest parts, at least with most of the private schools, is kind of the background check process. So when you have, we have right now, I think 9 schools with this company, and we're looking at being around 15 in August. So when you have 15 schools and we run tennis, pickleball, STEAM, tutoring. I think we're starting basketball now. I think that's a new one. We do a lot. It's hard for even me to keep track of all of the different offerings that we have. So that's a lot of different staff. And when one of them calls out, kind of each school has like a different background check process. So some of them allow us to submit ones that we've done, but most of them you have to submit one that's very specific to the school. So that becomes hard, kind of creating like a system in line, like, hey, like telling, instructor B, like, I need you to do this background check and this like slip, trip, and fall training for this school, but you might never even go there. So that's become a bit of a challenge, and kind of one thing that we've learned how to do. And I learned this from working with the other company. Well, I came up with the idea, but in the time being there, was to hire like an on-call person. So having one person who gets paid just to do nothing. And then if they work, they get paid kind of like double or whatever the exact number is. So think like they get paid maybe half, and if you're a smaller company, assigned just for every school. But if you have like 15 schools, we might have two, and each one's assigned to like a cluster of the schools. So, and then also our directors are approved, and I'm approved in that situation. It usually has ended up being me. But as you expand, and as we expanded with the last company, we had to do that. And now as we're looking to expand with this one, it becomes impossible for one person to be there. And people call out. We also offer incentives if they don't call out, but it never seems to matter.
Okay, that was gonna be my follow-up question, like, have you found incentives that work? And I guess sometimes we can't help when, we get sick, but if we can try to put incentives in place and just try those things out. I think that idea is really wonderful. It's the first time I've heard that, to have a person who is not scheduled to teach their own programs, but they're on standby, and when they fill a program at the last minute, they get double because they do have to be ready and agile at any time to fill in. And we do want to compensate that accordingly. And then
Right.
also making sure that our leadership and our behind the scenes people, as many of us as possible, are trained and prepared and experienced to fill in classes when a need arises. Something we do is we provide a stipend for all of our instructors to do all the different background checks for the different districts and schools and partners we work with, because we find that having as many people trained in the different districts and private schools in our area as possible, we want that covered in case someone can cover someone else
Right.
at the last minute. But then we also recognize that, okay, this takes quite a bit of time to do 5 different, 6,
Right.
7 different background checks, and the different forms you have to fill out for each of the schools. So we do a lump sum payment when an
Okay.
instructor starts, just to show, respect for the time that they put into
Right.
that.
Yeah, no, definitely. That is a great idea. The one thing that with some of the private schools, because the private schools usually pay for the background checks, a lot of them don't want many instructors background check, which then becomes more of an issue. So if we submit, like, if we need 2 instructors there, they'll usually let us submit 3. So, they don't want more than that. And then that's
Yeah.
where it gets kind of iffy. So,
You got to choose wisely.
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So my next question is around the diversity of schools that you serve. So you serve Title I schools, and you also serve private schools. So those are two very different demographics. And Title I schools refer to schools who get federal Title I funding. And that funding is made eligible to public schools who have a certain threshold of students who meet the requirements for being low income, coming from a low income household. I think it's about 30 something percent. So you serve Title I schools where a significant portion of students come from low income backgrounds, and private schools. So how do you approach serving a range of different school partnerships?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think There's a kind of a few different ways. So with the private schools, I mean, that's where most of the money is going to be at. So, the parents usually pay for it. There's a few kids that are on like financial aid. So we usually have to like, they pay us less for those kids, which is fine. But those are pretty straightforward. For the Title I schools, it's going to depend on the school. So some of them we just charge a little bit less. Some of them not yet, but we're working on creating a sliding scale. So that means you kind of if 30% of the kids are the ones that need funding, that doesn't mean every kid does. So we can kind of balance it out. So if you can pay for it, that's great. If you can't, that's also great. And then that kind of helps cut down the cost. So I think that's always a good method. We do have a tutoring department I mentioned, and some of our tutors are willing to do sliding scales. I kind of I'm not going to require that from a tutor, but if they want to offer that, which a few of them do, they do that as well. And then we also partner with a few different nonprofits, and then we get grants as well to support some of the costs just because we are new. I would love to be in a place where, specifically to me, I want to work with a lot of Title I high schools, which is not real. We have one right now. That's not really what we do, but that I would love to do that. But we partner with like a foundation who funds the coaching fees for one of those. And then I think we're going to get grants for like half, and then like half is going to come out of pocket for us with one of the nonprofits we partner with called Horizons. And that's like 60 kids we're serving completely for free. So it just depends. And there's different means. Right now, we have to work with as many private, and there's no reason not to work with private schools. I don't mean that, but we have to work with as many of those as possible to get funding to be able to support some of these programs. And then, it's just a scale. And honestly, for me, I want to provide our services to as many schools as possible. So I don't really care what type of, like, we have schools that have 60 kids and we have giant public schools, so it doesn't matter to me. As long as, we can come in and do our best and give a good product, which I know we can. And obviously a Title I high school is going to be different than a kid private school for kindergarteners. So the offerings are going to be different and all of that. But at the core, it's similar.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I resonate with all of it. I mean, especially being creative when we are working with different communities and different partners. We don't want to not offer our services in communities where income may be more of a challenge. It's a challenge to be overcome. It's an opportunity to be
Right.
creative. And I think about my own background growing up. My mom wouldn't have been able to afford any of these programs. So I always keep little me in
Yep.
mind. And I believe that you can do well by doing good. And if there is a bit more creativity and ingenuity on the front end, then those opportunities can still be offered without us losing money. Things that we do are we offer scholarship spots and we calculate that into our minimum. So once our minimum enrollment is hit and we know that we're not going to lose money running this program, then we can offer a sliding scale scholarship spot. We have a very short form that the requester would fill out, and then we make that available. We've never had to say no to that. So that's a great feeling. We also offer additional funding for programs if a partner, maybe it's a Parks and Rec partnership or a school partnership, if they want to make the price lower for everyone in the program, the PTO may say, we'll put $1,000 into the program so that the price can come down to dollars to everyone. So the entire program can be cost subsidized. And I appreciate what you said about applying for grants and working with nonprofits. So not competing with nonprofits, but actually working in connection with them, because a lot of nonprofits are very skilled at getting funding, but not all nonprofits actually disseminate the services. Most at least partially partner with other businesses to then disseminate the services that they got their funding for. You have had success with working with nonprofits and getting grants. What experiences or what skills have been instrumental in you being successful partnering with nonprofits and receiving grant funding?
I've received over $100,000 in grant funding in less than a year from grants that I've written, which I would say is pretty successful, especially for what we're applying for.
Darren, it's highly successful. I need you to not be humble here. Darren, I'm impressed. It's
I
highly
don't know.
successful.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So with that, it's kind of like getting on like a call with these people. I think I try and get on the phone with them or set up a meeting just to talk about what we do and what we're trying to do before I even submit a grant. So we try and get ahead of the cycle. So let's say that the grant's due on April 1st, like early March at the latest, try and set up a meeting and really explain to them face to face. And then as far as like the grant writing with AI and all this stuff, that's not the hardest thing in the world. I try and make it sound good, but I think it's really that personal connection and really showing them like a face to the brand. So like, hey, like I'm Darren. I might not be the one actually coaching it, but now you get to know who I am and why I'm doing what I'm doing. I can tell you a little bit about my story, and then I'm more likely to be on your radar at a bare minimum. And I know I said that I've gotten a lot of money in grants. I've also not gotten grants too. So it's not like I'm 100%. But one of the cool things with now being a for-profit is if we partner with a nonprofit and we work with them, the nonprofit can receive the grant, which because we can't most of the time. So, so we're able to apply and people, we partner. The other question you asked was like successful partnerships with nonprofits. I think we try and, again, we do education stuff, but that's newer. So we're mostly sports based, and I try and partner with kind of education nonprofits to be able to provide that additional resource. And usually the nonprofits don't really pay us. So they're very open to that. And I'm the one applying for the grants for the nonprofits. And usually I try and also connect them with some other people. So if I go talk to someone, have a good meeting, I'm like, hey, you really should talk to Horizons a little bit more and see if you can help them with other stuff outside of what I'm doing. So again, these nonprofits have really good missions and are doing really good things. So if I can help them outside of the scope of what I'm doing, I think that's great. But it kind of comes back to the idea of being like a real partner with them and not just someone behind a screen,
Yeah. And so from your answer, I hear be in connection, be in community build the relationships. Before you're applying to the grant, who's reading it, get into contact with them.
Right.
Know what you're applying for before you apply for it. And the same with collaborating with nonprofits. Build the relationships first, and then the partnerships come after.
Yeah.
Build the relationship with the granting organization first, and then the grant funding comes after. So it's a longer term, more strategic approach and not transactional. And a lot of people go into different dynamics purely transactional, and that doesn't work as well, as we see.
Yeah. And I will say, like, for the people listening, like, it does get hard because a lot of what you do in this role is planning for the future, and it's always the future and the future. But that is the right way to do it. And you want to build something that's good. You don't want to rush into it, and you want to be able to say like you'd rather get $500 of funding today or like $5,000 in a couple months after you really build the relationship. So
yeah, and that's how you get to 100,000 in grant funding. That is very rare. So it is that long.
I think that's true. Now you're making me think that I didn't do that, but I think I did. I think I'm trying to, I don't know the exact number, but it's right over 100,000. It's not like 500,000.
Yeah. It is highly successful for a for-profit youth enrichment business to have really any success getting grant funding. So, I hope the listeners have takeaways from your success that we can then implement as we apply for different opportunities throughout the country and wherever our businesses are at. So you've worked inside schools as staff, and now you work with schools as a partner and a vendor. How does your experience working inside of schools change the way that you and your team shows up?
Yeah, so I understand the perspective of someone who is like an enrichment coordinator or an after school director or auxiliary programs, whatever you want to call it, because I was kind of like an assistant for that. So I understand certain things that annoy them. I understand things that they like, and that's how we kind of approach it. So there's certain, like, I try and make it as easy as possible for them. we work, in my opinion, we work for the school. School doesn't work for us. So we come in and try and make it as easy as possible. So we come in, if they want help with carpool, we help with carpool. If they just want us to show up and do the class, we show up and do the class. I don't require the schools to do anything additional. I know some people that are competitors with me do, and they want the schools to do all these like things, and it creates all this extra work for the school. So we just try and make it as easy as possible.
Yeah, that is again like your long-term thinking. It's interesting that it already shows up in success right now in the short term, in the immediate.
Right.
Partnering with schools in a meaningful way. Car line help. We know dismissal, they could always use a pair of extra
Yep.
hands, and not everyone will say yes to that, but those
Correct.
who need it appreciate it.
Yeah, and I mean, also like our company is like sponsoring an event for one of the schools we work at. I've stayed. I remember I think I was teaching the class. I don't exactly remember, but they were like moving boxes, and I stayed 2 hours late to help the school administrators move boxes. And again, like as you expand, that becomes less and less possible, but someone can do that, even if it's not me. And that's kind of like one of the Title I schools we worked with. One of the kids I was talking about led this, not me, but he went in, refurbished a bunch of their gym equipment and all this stuff for them because they didn't have the funds to be able to do that. So, we try and do more than the class. We try and actually partner with the school.
Yeah, and your approach then emanates in how you staff and schedule your staff. That was your approach, and you're making sure that that's in the DNA and the fabric of how
Right.
services are delivered on your behalf through your staff. So, following the thread of staffing, so you're building a team pretty quickly in lots of different roles: tutoring director, a COO, community service director.
Sure.
How do you approach and think about hiring at this stage?
As far as staffing goes, our COO actually handles all of the staffing. I rarely interact with the staff unless I'm actively at the school or when they first meet me. So just that allows me to focus more on the business side, and she runs more the operations side. I know I talked about like showing up early. So I know all of the staff, but they know her a lot more than they know me, which is fine. And I mean, it's how it has to be in order for it to work successfully. But with hiring, really, on all of those roles, the tutoring thing I thought was a natural segue between athletics and education. We already have a client base. That was something I wanted to do from the start. I think it is something. I think originally it was tennis, pickleball, and tutoring, tutoring was the one I didn't do before, but that was the original three. And Helen, our COO, was going to lead that, but she ended up becoming too busy with like how much we were expanding. So we brought someone on to help with that who's amazing. Very grateful to have her on the team. Her name is Leanne. With the community service, we were interviewing for tennis coaches. I think it was tennis coaches. And I started meeting with a few people, and they were talking, and I was like, oh my God, like we have to create this community service branch of the company, because these people, it was like, there were three that really stood out to me when we were just doing coaching. And I was like, they have such great leadership qualities, such great community service experience. Like, why aren't we doing this? And I did think about it before, but it wasn't something I wanted to do for a while until we got everything else off the ground. But one of them particularly, who's our director, Amaya, really inspired me. And I was like, we just have to make this a thing. Basketball, the guy approached me. Tennis and pickleball, we have a director for now just because of all the other things we have going on. And we're probably going to bring on a STEAM person as well. But a lot of people approach me with stuff too, like ideas to come work for us.
So that's a beautiful approach to expansion, where the
Yeah.
demand is like literally knocking down your door for you to offer these things. That's a good
Right.
indicator. That's something to get into.
Yeah, exactly.
As you expand your company, who do you call when things get hard? Who do you call for support, mentorship, collaboration, any of that?
Right. I would say primarily is going to be our COO. I kind of think she's my boss in a way. I feel like she knows more what's going on in the company than me. And she's super helpful. My first ever tennis class that I ran, I was in high school. She just graduated from college, was a teacher, and they were like, you need to go find a faculty to do it with you because you're under 18. So the first ever class that we ever ran like this was when I was in high school. and she just started teaching. And that's kind of how all of it really started, I guess. So I've known her forever. So she's a great sounding board. Outside of that, I mean, I really love what I do. So I talk to my friends, my family about it all the time. So they're probably tired of it. But, you know, anytime I have any issues, there's always people I call, probably primarily her, just because she knows actually what's happening more than me. But like, I'll text her, like, hey, can I do this? And she'll be like, you run the company. Like, you don't need to ask me, you know? So it's nice to still have someone that, even though I'm in charge, that I can bounce ideas off of for sure.
Yeah, I just met with my COO. Was it
Yeah.
yesterday? I had an idea. By the time I finished the idea, it was a flop because I could see her reaction, and she's like, "So you want to do this?" And it just okay, it didn't make sense. She knows more
Right.
of the operational
Right.
reality of things,
Exactly.
and sometimes I have these pie in the sky ideas. So it is nice to have your operational lead to keep you, grounded in reality, but also that
Right.
person who sees opportunities from the day-to-day reality and can bring those to you and help scale in that way as well.
Right. And also, I feel like I know we're already expanding really fast, but if she wasn't there, we'd probably have like 30 departments and the company would have like crashed and burned by now. You know, she keeps it kind of grounded as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we all need those types of people on our
Yeah.
team if we want to not only thrive in the long term, but if we want to survive. And that's what we're here to do, to
Right.
not only survive, but we want to thrive. Okay. So my next question is around aspiring entrepreneurs, those who maybe they have a similar path in that they were a passionate athlete in their younger days. Maybe they got injured and maybe they want to teach that to kids in their community or adults in their community. They just don't know where to start. What would be your advice for that person listening?
Yeah. I think if you're passionate about something and you have the means to do it, you should really try it. I think that's definitely, follow what you love. We spend so much time working. I mean, especially people like us who run companies. And if you're an entrepreneur, if you love it though, it doesn't feel like work all the time. It still does some of the time, especially when something goes wrong or something like that. Yeah, right. Exactly. But, you know, I would definitely, take a risk, especially if you have the ability to and you're younger, because you don't want to look back and not do it. And, you know, I know I'm young, but I feel like there are times that I've failed at things, and I fully think that they're failures, but I think that that's like a good thing and has led me to where I am, and kind of you learn from them. So I think that's fine too. I think a lot of people are scared to kind of take a risk. That's probably part of the reason why when I first did this, I did it with a different company because I wanted someone else to help back it. And I kind of learned I don't need that and I can do it myself. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Like people in our company do that and that's great and very, we can help and certain companies have more means, but definitely take risk, and try things out for sure.
And my 2 cents to that would be, yes, do it while you're young and before you have kids,
Right.
because if
Exactly.
you want to take a big leap and your kids, they need for you to not be taking that
Right.
leap financially. They need some
Right.
security.
Exactly.
And it's not to say to not do that when you have kids, but you do need to have more of a plan, more of a runway, more of a safety net, and your risks should be more calculated as a responsible parent. Or if you have dependents relying on you, and anyway, it could be, a family member, a parent, grandparent that depends on you. You just have to be a bit more intentional with those risks, but it's not to say to not take those risks. And if you can take those risks early, then do before your cost of living inflates. All right.
Yeah.
So, Darren, this has been wonderful. I've learned a lot. So I am absolutely certain that anyone listening has also learned a lot from your story and your meteoric rise thus far, and just all of your success and early scale and expansion is just really impressive and inspiring. So for you, when you think about your business in 5 years, what does that look like? Not just the numbers, but
Yeah.
what does it look like to you?
That's such a great question. I think as I wrote out kind of a plan of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be in 5 years, and that was to have like the 5 departments of the company, and we kind of already have that, which is crazy. But yeah, I would really love to be in probably like 100 schools in Georgia for sure. Looking at maybe expanding to like Florida, some local states as well in the 5 year mark, and really have all 5 of those departments. at the level of our tennis department. Right now tennis and pickleball department, and that's what I did. And I've done it for longer. That's the one that is thriving the most. That's the one that has the most programs. And it's not really close. So I would love for those departments as well to be just as strong.
Okay. I know you're going to achieve those goals. And just as some of those 5-year goals you've already achieved, I wouldn't be surprised if you achieve those much earlier than anticipated. So thank you so much, Darren. This is Darren Chase, founder and CEO of Chase Youth Programs in Atlanta. If listeners want to follow your journey more, if they want to connect with you or learn more about Chase Youth Programs, how can they find you? How can they learn more?
Yeah, so our website is chaseyouthprograms.com. My email is darren@chaseyouthprograms.com. You can also follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn, Darren Chase, and my phone number is 203-904-0353.
And that information will be in the show notes. Darren, thank you so much for sharing your story. It is inspirational to say the least. And I'm sure the listeners look forward to following your journey and all the successes that are in store for you in Chase Youth Programs. And one more thing, remember, I'm building NROPS, finally, an all-in-one platform built specifically for kids, enrichment, entrepreneurs, and operators. We're talking everything all in the same place. Finally, from scheduling to instructor management to partner and parent communication to onboarding and registration, all of it. I built it because we need it. So go to getinrops.com to get on the list. See you next episode.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much, Darren. And that's a wrap. Know someone who needs to hear this episode? Share it because
Sharing is caring.
if this episode earned it, give us all the stars in a review on whatever platform you're listening on because it helps other enrichment entrepreneurs find this show. Got a question or a story worth telling? Head to enrichmententrepreneur.com. You can submit your questions, apply to be a guest, and access resources to help you launch and grow your business. Again, that's enrichmententrepreneur.com.
Until next time, keep learning, keep building.